Our speaker tonight is Norm Marcy, and he's going to talk to us about kayaking with respect in First Nations traditional lands. This is a really timely topic for anybody that paddles on the waters on BC West Coast. The changes that have occurred within a number of banned areas require people requiring permits for not only camping but paddling, and also the changes that are coming are important for all paddlers. Plus the court cases that have gone through and ended up around the Cowichan lands on the Fraser River also could possibly impact what we do. Norm will talk about the underpinnings of the First Nations interests and the rights on the BC coast. He will discuss current developments and public disclosure involving First Nations issues. This is especially important in understanding the potential for conflict with the increase in recreation on First Nations traditional territories, including encompassing the shifting perspectives of this type of recreational use. And there have been stories about people not understanding and having conflict. The listener will also get a better understanding of approaches involving the care of the lands and waters we all share to ensure long-term access. Norm's been a paddler for a long time. He's also been involved with Native communities, and he's had involvement with over 75 negotiations on the tri-party, the federal, provincial, and Native tables that have been ongoing for a very long time. So let's welcome Norm Marcy. The magic wand.
The magic wand, yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Everybody can hear me? Okay. This is going to be a long-ish session, if you like it to be, or it can be short if you like it to be. But I would encourage you to just put your hand up and ask a question if you have them as I'm going through. And if it's not making sense to you, I'll either answer the question right away, or I'll say I'm going to get to that in a few minutes if I haven't covered it already. And so that's it. And really, Fred introduced a lot of my background, and I'm currently the past chair of BC Marine Trails First Nation Engagement Committee, and on the Outdoor Recreation Council Indigenous Reconciliation Committee province-wide. And some of the work that we've done over the last 10 years or so is included in this presentation. Okay. I know you do a territorial recognition statement at the beginning of your meetings. Okay, great. Here we're kind of in a transition between a couple of different major First Nation groups. And so this recognition of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, both the Songhees and the Kosapsum, or the Esquimalt, and then the Wasanich people, which are the people of Sanish Peninsula and the Malahat, and their language is slightly different, all part of the Coast Salish. And these are the rights holders, the Aboriginal title and Aboriginal rights holders. And I'll explain more about what Aboriginal title is and what Aboriginal rights are as we go along. As I said before, I'm part of BC Marine Trails. I've stepped back because of some issues that I have personally, my health issues, but I didn't do that. BC Marine Trails is a nonprofit organization. If you're not a member, please join. And it would be, we're trying to secure long-term public access along the coast for paddlers, but also other boat users. Why is respectful reconciliation important? There's growing conflict, partly as First Nations assert themselves, partly as individual perceptions of First Nations issues changes and is influenced by the media. And shifting perspectives on recreation in First Nation territories, recognition that First Nations have rights and have title in some places that are within their territory. And First Nations are taking care of their lands in a much more active way. And by us as recreational users being respectful, we can help ensure long-term access.
Sorry, I just wanted to back up to the acknowledgement. There's been some issues with people are saying, when do you say ceded, when do you say unceded? Is it better to say traditional territory? Like, we're trying to figure out the wording so we don't insult anybody, I guess, for lack of a better way.
Okay. Generally across the province, lands are unceded. So that, I kind of just avoid that when I'm talking, so that, because different people will have different understandings of that. But unless there's been a treaty that has ceded the land to a different entity, so from the First Nation to a government, another government, then the land is unceded. The First Nations were there first, and the Crown in 1846 asserted title over top. That didn't mean that that initial title disappeared, but the new title was asserted over top, and over time, as more and more non-Aboriginal people arrived here, we willfully ignored that base title. So, yeah, mostly it's unceded. And your other part of your question was?
What's the correct language? Would be just to use a traditional territory?
This is the traditional territory of the specifics of Aboriginal title and the specifics of what their rights are. And the rights are those activities that sustain their culture. So it might be fishing, it might be using cedar, it might be building houses, it might be doing all those things that sustain your culture. Those are the rights. And the title is the place that you use exclusive of others and you protected for your own use. And so that might be a small part of your territory, even though you might have used a lot of land that's not part of the title land. But there's only a few places where title has been defined. I've got a slide on that, but that's a good question. Carry on. If I miss a hand, make sure you let me know. So, unlike a lot of organizations in the outdoor recreation sphere in British Columbia, the BC Marine Trails mission starts right off the bat in the first line: work with First Nations and stakeholders, the non-Aboriginal interests across the province, to build, protect, and promote public network of marine trails. That's really sets the stage for what we've done at BC Marine Trails over the last 10 years. We at BC Marine Trails identify and validate sites so that you don't have to. There's a safety mandate that we're trying to pursue, which is every 8 kilometers, 8 nautical miles, trying to have a place where you can get off the water, either a safety stop or more, hopefully, a camping spot. Where there are high use areas, trying to organize the resources for toilets, bear caches, raccoon caches, whatever you want to call it, depending on where you're at. That's a hard to do thing, takes a lot of money, takes a lot of effort, and a lot of partnerships. Provide the trip planning resources, measurement tools, all that kind of stuff in the mapping that we do. Promote and execute stewardship. This might be removal of invasive species, cleaning up beaches, or other stewardship events with other partners, the surf riders, other cleanup groups, or First Nations, and those things help contribute to the good name that we have in the community. And then the BC Marine Trails map, which I'm sure many of you, or if not all of you, have at least taken an initial look at. That map also has a lot of First Nations information, where First Nations have provided that information to us. We have disseminated that information through our map and through the website. So the basic layer of the map, there are layers for planning and so on that are not necessarily public, even if you're a member, has trip planning and site condition reports on 719 tent sites, almost 400 launch sites, close to 400 day use areas, and some emergency pullouts. And as you look, this is on the west side of Texada. When you click on any one of these icons, information about the lat and long of that place, what the beach looks like, what size are the cobbles, or the sand, is it sandy or cobbly, or rock shelf landing, or that sort of thing, is all on the site. Preaching to the knowers already here. So this will be partly a reiteration of the answer to the question previously. Aboriginal people were the first people on the land, and Aboriginal held title is the first title on the land. And so First Nations have exercised their rights, which is the maintenance of their culture on the land, by all of the things that they have done and continue to do on the land. And the Crown then asserted title over top, and that Aboriginal title has never gone away. They've both existed. The Aboriginal title is constitutionally protected. The private land title that you and I might have is created in legislation. They have different foundations in law. The constitutional being that you can't have legislation that overrides a constitutional right. So, yes, you have legislation that gives you private land rights, but you can't have that and eliminate the constitutional right that the First Nation has. So both are existing at the same time in law. So First Nations are exercising their Aboriginal rights, and some of the things that you see that are evidence of that include their guardian programs, access fees for accessing their territory or use of campsites that they've designated, and Indigenous protected and conserved areas. Some of the examples. Government consultation happens when someone applies for a permit from government. Government has to consult with the First Nation and seek their response, and where appropriate, provide some accommodation of the First Nations' interests. BC Marine Trails and paddlers are not a government, so instead of doing consultation, we talk about doing engagement and seeking concurrence, not consulting, but engaging and seeking concurrence. Concurrence being authorization, really, from the First Nation. If any of you have ever been involved in trying to get a government permit from the Provincial Lands Authority or forests, it takes a long time. 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't uncommon for 2, 3, or 4 years to go by for a recreational use permit on Crown land. And what we realized is that by going directly to the First Nation, who government, after you applied to the government, would be going to get some sanction for the use of that land, go directly to the First Nation and bypass the government entirely. So that's what we've done. It doesn't give us a piece of paper from the Crown that says you can use this, but it gives you an authority concurrence from the First Nation that paddlers and others can use that site. And so I've really set out that there's a conflict between that Aboriginal title and private title, or activities that the Crown authorizes on Crown land. And how do we resolve that? Well, it's really the process of creating agreements between the Crown and First Nations to resolve how those two titles and the resulting privileges that people have will interact. And so in some places now we have treaties, in some places we have emerging treaties, some places we have other agreements for land use planning, forest management, parks, et cetera, that the Crown and First Nations have been able to come together and figure out a reconciliation between the interests that are, 1, constitutional, and 2, legislative. And in all of the time that I've been doing this, since 1990, we've never been in a situation where the First Nation is adamant that they are going to take away private land rights. So this whole issue around the Kayaking, which we can touch on a little bit later as well, because I've got a map to show that, is an issue that government has to resolve. Kayaking's been trying to do this through the courts and other processes for 110 years. Really a lot of this was created originally by the first Attorney General, I think he was Attorney General, Moody, when he was the surveyor who was charged with going out and surveying where the Kayaking village was in what is now Richmond. And instead of doing that, he surveyed the land, and then he bought it for himself. And then he sold it to his friends, and who then sold it again, and then who then sold it again, and now we grow blueberries there. So a little bit of jiggery-pokery taking over the village site there. This is, I've tried over.
Question here.
Okay, go ahead.
Dripa, what is that?
Dripa. Okay, I'll back up to that. So DRIPA is the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People was created by the United Nations, set out many different parameters for governments to consider and implement in dealing with the Indigenous people that are in their lands across all the countries. Canada was very late to adopt that, but both British Columbia and Canada have now done so in different ways. In British Columbia, we have what's called DRIPA, so the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. And that act essentially sets out that the provincial legislation will become compliant in accordance with a kind of an agreed to schedule of priorities between the First Nations and government for compliant with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And so DRIPA, whether it exists or doesn't, is not the solution to resolving this private land versus Aboriginal land title issue. It's kind of a red herring in the middle of this that people have glommed onto and said, we need to pull DRIPA or change the legislation because it affects the private land. And what the court case out of Kayaking said was, out of GitGat, said that all of the legislation that hasn't been changed yet needs to be compliant right now. Well, that wasn't the agreement that the First Nations and government had made, which is they were going to work on it on a sequential basis to try and become compliant over time. So, got a conflict between what the court said and what the politicians had agreed they would try to do what the court said. This is just my first attempt at a schematic. I don't like it very much. Indigenous land appropriated by the Crown, sold to individuals and corporations, and Crown and Aboriginal title being negotiated. I think the layering is maybe a better way of explaining it, but this was an earlier attempt of trying to explain that to people. There are a few places where Crown and First Nations have either through court or through negotiations determined where title is. So in 2014, the Silkwatine west of Williams Lake in the plateau lands by Choco Lake and so on went to the Supreme Court. Let's put it this way, they went to the Supreme Court a lot before that, but it finally was decided in 2014, and a large area of the Chilcotin and Caribou country became title land. Government and the Silkwatine have worked on what the arrangements for management of that land are ever since. Nechatlet 2 years ago, also at the Supreme Court, also with the same lawyers as Silkwatine had, have title to a large portion of the northwest corner of Nootka Island, about 12 kilometers square. The Silkwatine is more like 2,000, I think, kilometers square, maybe even bigger. Terry, do you remember? No. I was looking at you very carefully to see whether you knew. In 2025, the Haida and British Columbia negotiated an agreement that sets out Aboriginal title for Haida Gwaii. This is at the end of a number of court cases over a couple of decades where every one of the court cases, British Columbia lost. It was very clear right from the beginning that the Haida were the only people there. They were exclusive of everybody else. They exercised rights and management over the entire set of islands. Title was kind of a no-brainer. Just try and stay out of court for the rest of the time. That Haida agreement also sets out and recognizes the existence and continued existence of private land. And then that brings us to 2025, the Kayaking agreement, and that I'll have a map up a little bit from now, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then other treaties that have been negotiated, like Sawasan or Sliammon or Malnuth on the west coast of the island, 5 or 6 First Nations on the west coast of the island, Comox, which is emerging now. Those are all treaties that cede land to the Crown and confirm title to the settlement land for nations. So when we're looking at that would be the existing reserves plus other lands that are designated in those negotiations as part of the deal. And Aboriginal title is a burden on Crown title, and the Crown title is what remains after Aboriginal title has been defined. We know that rights exist on traditional territories. We don't know where, but we know that title exists somewhere in traditional territories. Yes?
Can you explain what you mean by a burden? And can you explain what you mean when Crown land title remains after Aboriginal title is defined? Those two things aren't really clear to me.
Okay. So, Aboriginal title is the first thing there. The Crown can't exercise its title, which they have asserted over top of the existing title, without dealing with the Aboriginal title. So the Crown title is not indefeasible, or it's not whole, because it is still affected by the Aboriginal title, which is this bottom of the pyramid. And so that's the burden part. And I think that answers your question.
So the next one though, so if Aboriginal title has been defined, for example, in Haida Gwaii, is there still Crown land title?
Not really, no.
And why does it say Crown land title is what remains after Aboriginal titles?
Well, it all depends on what's negotiated. So in some places, like Mulnooth, there are many small parcels of land on the west coast of the island which become settlement land. And the agreement says that these are settlement land plus this pile of cash plus these other management rights. And in exchange, the Crown can manage the rest, either clearly without First Nation oversight, or sometimes with First Nation participation in that decision making. Yeah. So we've just talked about what governments need to do and reconciliation, and what can we do for citizen-based reconciliation. And it's good to learn about what the government's doing and what First Nations are doing, but without action, we just have a few thoughts and we haven't really done very much yet. So when we look at some of the activities that have gone on recently with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the book from Murray Sinclair, various think tanks and do tanks that are out there working on reconciliation and reconciliation. One of the key things is that people take action at a community level and at an individual level. And that's a little bit of what I hope that we get to taking away from this presentation. And how BC Marine Trails is contributing to that reconciliation is recognizing Aboriginal rights and title right out of the gate when we're talking to First Nations. That is a big step. That First Nations then recognize, okay, you get it. You understand where our rights are. You understand that we're here to stay and we each have to work together to be able to figure out how to manage things together. And that puts us on a good footing for building a relationship. Seeking concurrence for sites, I see your hand. Seeking concurrence for sites is, asking permission, and sometimes we don't get that permission. Concurrence doesn't come. In fact, the opposite happens. Take that site off, because we don't want people going there because it's important to us to manage our culture and our rights in that place. Your question?
When you say recognition of Aboriginal rights and title, is that recognition of those Aboriginal rights and title that have been already recognised by negotiation and government, or are they a blanket recognition that you were here first and therefore you have Aboriginal rights and title?
To a degree, the second thing. So Aboriginal rights and title, we recognize that they're there, but it's not our job to define what those rights are, to argue with you about what those rights are, or try to tell you as a nation where your title is. So it's up to the First Nation and governments to work out those rights and title. And we say, that's great, and whatever that result is, we will live with.
Kind of like being a courteous visitor.
Yeah, being a courteous visitor, exactly, yeah. Yeah.
Question.
And then when we're working with First Nations and developing a relationship, go ahead.
No, no, a simple question. So when you're talking about the land that falls under the Aboriginal rights and title, how far into the water does that extend?
What was the proposed question, answer over there?
No.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case. It depends on a couple of things. One, it depends on how, if you're talking about Indian reserve land, it depends on how that was surveyed originally, and that might be a 200-year-old survey, 175-year-old survey, however that is. So that I wouldn't presume that it's always the ordinary high water mark. Sometimes it's low water mark, and what I would assume, because of where you use the land exclusively, out of respect, I would say that's probably a place where the Indian Reserve is, where you likely have title. Not my job to determine what that title is, but I'm going to assume that you have title there, and I'm not going to go on the beach in front of your reserve. I'm not going to impinge on your use of the beach in front of your house, and I'm not going to use your Indian Reserve land because it's private without your permission. Just like I don't want somebody coming into my backyard to camp without asking me first. Yeah. Okay. Where was I?
I'm going to ask a question that isn't maybe relevant, but I hope we...
All questions are relevant. All questions are relevant.
Up north in the Nassau-Mosquina area, timber licenses were given to Twin River, which has probably trained its name, massive tracts of the Aboriginal land. Have they gotten it back? You may not know.
Twin River was a forest company, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay. And the right to harvest the timber is exactly that, the right to harvest the timber. It's not a right to the land itself on Crown land. So part of the Northwest conundrum is hemlock. And hemlock has been over many years not the most desirable species of wood in the wood market. And so I would guess that a lot of that timber has not been harvested. Anywhere where the timber that you're talking about was on what became Niska settlement land would not have been harvested by the timber company. I don't have the map in my head, so I can't remember that exactly. When we're engaging with First Nations, oftentimes the conversation comes to, this is how we would like people to visit our land. This is how we would like people to travel through our territory. This is some of the concerns that we have around marine management or the existence of parks or whatever it is. And so those discussions sometimes lead to management directives that can be published by BC Marine Trails and available to you and others that are paddling or traveling through their territories. This is, one, a sign of respect for the nation's management of their rights, and two, it empowers them and also reflects very well on BC Marine Trails that we're helping to reconcile the interests between the recreation public and the First Nation. So that's a strong point. The other part of it is, as I mentioned before, when a First Nation says those are places where there's too much use or it's a strongly cultural importance to us. We don't want to know, and we don't need to know what that cultural significance is, or how important is it to you. We say, thank you for that information. At your direction, we are taking it off the map. That builds goodwill and trust and shows that we're serious. What I would ask you to do as paddlers now is when a site's taken off, and in some places you'll see on BC Marine Trails map, where a site that you thought was there before isn't there anymore. So that's one way of seeing it on the map. And the second is some places there's a circle with an X, red X, there's a red circle with a white X through it. That's, there's a directive to try and keep that place unused.
Just wondering how many sites have you had to remove?
About 160, I think, but I've got a slide for that in a minute.
Out of how many? There's
Out of 1,000? Yeah.
Have you been able to maintain your 8 nautical mile distance from site to site with that in mind?
Yes, mostly. There's, there are big chunks of the coast where that has not been determined yet. We haven't got a successful part of that done yet, partly because we haven't been able to engage with some First Nations yet. There are 74 First Nations on the coast. BC Marine Trails is doing an amazing job with at least 50 First Nations that we've talked to, probably 54, I think. But, so that's a lot. And I always thought that we were like the bee's knees as far as it comes to recreation organizations. BC Nature, counting birds and looking at swamps and things like that with First Nations, has talked to somewhere around 170 First Nations. So it is a huge job. It's a full-time job. And we have a great committee and a full-time staff person working on it.
Has anything come up to replace Cabbage Island?
No, but I'll talk about Cabbage Island in a minute. Yeah. So this is really what the work of the First Nation Engagement Committee is with BC Marine Trails, building respectful relationships, reviewing site data with nations, so any information that you provide on site condition reports or trip reports that say, there's a great camp spot here that, people should know about. We try to work with First Nations to get concurrence for their continued use. Reflect Indigenous management, which I've talked about already, and then promote respectful visitation. And that's, following a code of conduct. Don't leave a mess, don't cut down trees, don't desecrate burial sites or trammel on middens, that sort of thing. I'm sure everybody here has walked on a midden. Sometimes you know about it and sometimes you don't. This guy over here is the pro on that information. This gets to your question about engagement. So we have a citizen-based reconciliation strategy. I'm doing a webinar tomorrow with Outdoor Recreation Council to describe that even further, and to as part of that, we've also I've written an engagement toolkit handbook for people outside the marine trails environment, how you would do that in any other place in the province. And so we've been seeking concurrence, as I talked about. Over 50 First Nations, almost 700 campsites approved in that process of engagement, and 124 planned sites or known sites removed. That's good for now. So we have a number of collaborative projects. Mamatilagula is a storyboard. You'll see that on the BC Marine Trails website. The House at Hot Springs Cove Trail is a work in progress. from Tofino to Hot Springs Cove. I'll get into more details around that later as far as how do you pay a fee, what's going on there. But just know that there have been a number of sites identified by the Ahousaht with BC Marine Trails that could be suitable for camping to avoid places like Shark Creek and Meejan River or other places where they don't want people to go. And those sites are in the process of being developed, but we've got to get the money and get the people and all that kind of stuff. So more work is probably going on that this summer. The HIDA, obviously been busy defining their title and dealing with Canada and British Columbia, have also recognized that they need to move away from resource exploitation economy and more to tourism and recreation economy. And we've worked over the last 4 years to do some development of paddling routes, Skidegate and Masset and Jacoost Inlet. So those are one of them. 2 of those reports are done, and the third one needs more work, and we're waiting for approval and the right timing for that.
Question.
Yep.
So it looks like you're working with these First Nations to build out these improvements. Is that something BC Marine Trails is funding? Or is it the user fees that the First Nations are collecting that's funding those improvements?
Generally, BC Marine Trails with, what, 1,300 members maybe, and it costs $35, doesn't, per member, really doesn't create the volume of money that's required to do the physical work. Any physical work that we have to do has to be money that's collected through funding from other organizations or contributed by the nation if they're trying to build an asset that they can then charge for.
So it's a partnership.
Yeah.
Or the 50-50 draw.
The 50-50 draw, I don't know who won that, but not you? Okay. Nobody in this room? Okay. Yeah, the 50-50 draw is a drop in the bucket. Some of these things take a lot more than 10 grand, so yeah. All right. So just a little bit of a run around the map on Vancouver Island here. We've got the Douglas Treaties, which is a bit of a, I'll say a stick in the ointment compared to when you go back to all the things I've already just told you. These treaties were created in the mid-1800s for about 14 sites on Vancouver Island. And in this area, that would be mostly on the Sandwich Peninsula and Songhees and Esquimalt. So those historic treaties have not precluded First Nations from entering into the BC Treaty Commission process, and those negotiations continue. Other modern treaties that are in process, and this creates the reconciliation between governments and the First Nation government. Pachidat at Port Renfrew, Ditidat is Nipnat Lake, Cowichan tribes, Sanemu, that's Nanaimo, Halalt, Layaxon, all of those are part of the Cowichan. Tumuk Treaty Association, which is some nations here and some nations up island. And one of the key elements here and right up to Campbell River is, and from Port Renfrew to Strathcona Park, is the ENN land grant. And this is another one of those, we stole it all and then just ignored the Aboriginal rights kind of stories, where that land was granted to Dunsmuir and others for the coal rights, the timber rights, the water, the base of the lakes, everything else. And then some of those resources have come back to the Crown and some of them have remained in private hands. 95% of the south and east part of Vancouver Island is private land. The First Nations have very little access in that area to Crown land and extremely small amounts of either Indian Reserve or, in the case of Comox right now, any treaty land. And so in some cases, like in the Comox emerging treaty that's happening now, private lands have been acquired by governments as part of the negotiation to go into those settlement agreements.
Do the Douglas treaties comment on private title?
No, they're really the villages and the fields surrounding those villages. So essentially, it's most likely that that is where the Indian reserves are now. The key element here is that those nations don't have access to any other land. The only way to get more land for those nations is to find a willing seller and governments to buy that land, to add more land to possible final agreement under a modern process. Yeah. Roaring around Vancouver Island, roughly the pink side here are the Nachalmouth nations. The buttery color is the Kwakiutl nations, and then the Salish on the south here. If anybody has any questions about any of those, I'll try to answer if I can remember enough detail. But that shows on Vancouver Island, I think on this map, there's about 45 First Nations. There's 204 First Nations in British Columbia. There's 74 on the coast. This is not a small problem that will go away soon. It's been a couple hundred years in the making, and will be a while before we're reconciled. Chatham and Discovery. BJ Porter and I worked on an article which is on BC Marine Trails. I think it was also in your newsletter. This is an area where the combination of Indian reserves and ecological reserves really precludes the use of most of the islands for recreation. And in fact, the Discovery Island Marine Park on Discovery Island at Rutland Bay is a provincial park, but will become treaty settlement land under the Songhees agreement as it's emerging now. The kind of great thing about it is that it will be not Songhees private treaty land, but it'll be Songhees public treaty land. So essentially creating a constitutionally protected treaty that has constitutionally protected recreation access at Rutland Bay. Not very many places you go where your land is constitutionally protected. That is in part recognition of the importance of Rutland Bay, the Discovery Islands Park for kayakers' use. Comox, another place that a lot of people from the Comox paddling group go, and a lot of people that are not paddlers go from Comox, Campbell River area, Comox and Courtney area, is the Sandy Islets or Tree Island, and that too will convert from a provincial park to public treaty land and be constitutionally protected as so. And the First Nation could later change that if people don't continue to respectfully visit. If people go there and leave a mess, people go there and be disrespectful, not follow the directions of guardian programs and that sort of thing, some of those privileges will be in jeopardy. I talked about the Nechatla Treaty title agreement from the courts 2 years ago. This is what that looks like. The The butter color here is the tidal area. There are private lands in the vicinity, and those are the black hatched areas. The purple areas are the existing Indian reserves. Island 44 and also Rosa Islet. I think Benson is also available. There's a number of places where you can still go, but this is, it took us over a year to get BC Parks to acknowledge the court case and put something on their website that said how this was going to emerge. It took almost 2 years of trying to talk to them, to chat with themselves about continued recreation in and around their tidal area. And that is a piece that's a work in progress. I think people's, just be fluid when you're trying to go there. Things might not all seem like they are when you emerge, and when you encounter somebody from the Chatlet, they probably, my perception is they won't have a lot of capacity to deal with visitors. There's still they're a very small First Nation, and the responsibilities of dealing with all that and dealing with a lot of visitors is something that they will have to manage, getting some processes up and running. Yeah.
There are lagoons there that do dry out at low tide. Would those be respected areas like you were mentioning before about?
If they're near the reserves, I would respect them, yes. The specifics of the title determination by the court are that in this case, the marine portions are still part of the provincial park that was there. So the provincial park still exists there without the land that became tidal land. Yeah, so, yeah. Beecher Bay, Skyanu. There will be some additions to the existing reserve land. Kind of hard if you're not close up here, but the existing reserve land is those large square bits, and then these longer thin pieces on the right hand side are additions to the emerging treaty with Skyanu. So even more land that will be part of their title land when that treaty is done. The isthmus is still there to camp on, or to stop for lunch on. The rest of that bay is much controlled by the nation. This will be the fun one.
Does that mean that the beaches there are not, we shouldn't land on them anymore?
I wouldn't, in an emergency, or when you, dump your boat, or you, I would stop, but stop if you have to, but don't make it a regular thing. We're not stopping to put up a fire and have a party.
No, but if we're stopping for lunch?
I wouldn't without asking first.
I think the reason this is because we have quite a few paddles that lead out of Spirit Bay.
Yeah.
And it's indigenous owned. I'm sure they kind of know we're stopping somewhere.
Yeah.
So
But neither BC Marine Trails nor you have explicit permission to go onto their land. Your permission is you paid your $10 to put your boat in the water. That's about as far as it goes.
And who would we ask?
Ask the nation, go to their office, ask them.
So as a club, we could ask people just
Yeah. Yep. And I know the BC Marine Trails hasn't done that for the general paddling public, but it, might be an idea to try and do that. Yeah.
So you've got the orange and then you've got the yellow. What's the yellow versus?
Okay, I'm going to try.
The yellow's has been added?
So this part here, this triangle here, is an add-on, as is that piece up there where I can there. Okay. Yeah, so this existing piece is Beecher Bay number 2. The Skyanu Nation is that top piece, and And then this other chunk of land along here is an add-on to these existing Indian reserves.
Wasn't that yellow piece, that was DND land, right?
Yeah, probably.
So effectively, if you're going to paddle down that coast, you're not allowed to stop in World Bay anymore, because the military has kicked us off of there. So the only place you can stop is that tom below, and you better plan your paddles so it's low tide when you get there.
Well, you know, it's, we've assumed a lot of privileges over time, and to bring about reconciliation, there will be adjustments. And yes, I understand it might be painful to you personally, but it is really the situation we're in takes that.
The part that I find difficult is when a group of 20 paddlers leaves the beach, the only thing we leave behind is the marks of the boats going back in the water.
And so the nations know that.
We get painted.
The only thing that we haven't done is ask permission. So if the nation knows that there's really no impact, it's highly likely that they're going to say okay.
So if I walk in that a decade, when the Songhees closed off the Chatham Islands and said, nobody set foot on these, and we respected that, and we went back to them every year or so and said, is it okay for us now to land on your beach and leave no trace when we leave? And the answer is always a hard no.
Yep.
So in the Chatham and Discovery Group, we have 2 places we can land, and that's it.
Yep.
And you can probably hear the frustration in my voice.
I just want to turn the table around for you and say, for the last 150 years, you white guys have been using our land without asking us. Maybe for a couple of years, we're going to say no.
And a lot of people used those lands without respecting them.
Yeah.
That's why they closed them off in the first place.
Yeah. So we might be, as a group of paddlers, very respectful, very clean, very good stewards of the environment. But the guy that runs out of Oak Bay with his jet ski, pulls up on the beach with a bunch of girls and a bunch of beer, and leaves a mess,
You forgot the barbecue.
is unfortunately another recreation user of the Indian Reserve. And the people at the Indian Reserve say it's really hard to distinguish. So if we let the kayakers on, then the Sea-Doo guy's going to show up because he thinks he can go there too. And then people go over there for their Sunday picnics with their kids, and they tie their sailboat up in the lagoon, which was like a special place to us, and it just cascades for them.
I take it you're talking about Cabbage Island there.
No, I'm not talking about Cabbage. I'm not talking about Cabbage Island yet. I will soon. So,
Excuse me, another question?
sure.
If we then want to ask permission as a club, we're almost 400 paddlers, so we're a significant entity.
Yeah.
So we want to ask permission of the nation. How would we then proceed? Let's say we get a yes. And then, is it enough to announce it in our newsletter that we then have permission? Is it something where we get a lawyered letter that says we have permission? How is the communication work?
Well, I think how you communicate it, or whether Cisco or some other organization makes the ask in the first place, takes direction from the First Nation back to their management directors for their territory and their land. We're talking private land here. The Indian Reserves, equivalent to private land or better, because they're constitutionally protected. You take direction from the landowner. And if the landowner says it's okay to put it in your newsletter, or it's okay to put it on BC Marine Trails site, or we are giving you permission as a club, but we don't want you publicizing it, those are all options. I don't think you need to get a letter from a lawyer. They just cost money. At the back. Oh, okay, sorry.
I think we forget that white people that aren't involved in energetic healing, that the energy we leave behind, it's not just the track from the kayak. The fact that we've been there changes the energy. When I come into my house, if somebody has been in, the energy is wrong. And it impacts me. And I wouldn't want, or my yard or my garden, I can tell. I've got an allotment garden. I can tell if somebody's been in there wandering around.
Yeah, there are certain cultural, spiritual practices, etc., that we generally not aware of, and I think you're trying to reflect that.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
In the frontier?
So, if we wanted to, as an individual, if we wanted to go kayak in Betcher Bay, we would call the Skianoo First Nations often? We would call, or should we?
Yeah, I would, and try to talk to either one of their marine management people or their land manager. Yeah.
So every time we would need to, I guess we need to ask them whether each.
Yeah, do I need to call you every time, or is it okay for me to go? Yeah.
There is a boatload of fishing boats that go in and out of Spirit Bay.
Yeah.
Every day, every weekend.
Yeah. Very few of them are stopping on the beach to go have a pee.
Regular white guys, so, I mean, they must know, some people are gonna beach here and there and do whatever.
Yeah. I'm just saying what is respectful. I'm not commenting on what the current practice by some people is. Yeah. So, and maybe there's tolerance that the First Nation has that, makes it seem fine, but nobody's asked.
We do have Aylard Farm too.
There you go. Yeah. At the back?
That's right.
Yes?
I would like to add to the debate that seems to be emerging for us all, and this is direct to BJ's comment about us and Rod approaching as a CISCA, as a club. As a club. Okay, so I'm trying to add to the debate a little bit here about us as CISTA approaching the use of Betcher Bay. Now, if we did as a club, we might be able to factor in with the Indigenous band that when we went, we announced we were CISTA members and we had some kind of negotiation in place, and that might facilitate it for us, not necessitating us publicizing it in a forum that would allow every recreational user. This is just to add to the potential ideas of us approaching them as a club, that's all.
Yeah.
And it's not, it would be respectful, and they might extend us the same respect, the spiritual acknowledgement, if you will, that, okay, we approached as a group, and we announce ourselves as a group. This is certainly what happened traditionally among Native groups when they were coming in here to trade or whatnot. They announced that they were coming in, and there was a peaceful aspect of what they were doing. So it's not untraditional for a group to approach a Native band and then engage in that way and ask for permission as a group, and then emphasize that we're members of that group. Yeah. It's just an idea, but I think it may be workable.
I think that you've got it right there. I think that's the right thing to think about. My only caution would be, I worked with VC Casey, the other kayak and canoe club here in Victoria, for a year and a half or more to try and get Songhees and Esquimalt to pay attention, because that club wanted to seek concurrence for addition of a new better dock in front of their club, and they were rebuffed by Saanich, but also by the nations, just not having the time, capacity, importance of that question. And it's respectful to go to Skianoo and ask the question. They might be too busy doing other stuff, so you have to remember that too. So that's you know, to be successful as BC Marine Trails in talking to over 50 First Nations, there's a lot of times when it's 2 years of trying to get your foot in the door. You know, that sometimes takes a long time. So persistence, politeness, both of those things are important. Cowichan. There are 6 nations that are part of the Cowichan group. Only 5 of them are part of the Cowichan tribe's decision. And so the outlier is Chubasset at Cowichan Lake. And so they are by association there. There's a number of places in Cowichan's territory that are closed. So Sansom narrows west, Tent Island, Blackberry, which was, I think, the first BC Marine Trails site ever, and Cottage, all for different reasons. So Sansom was closed partly because the private schools in Mill Bay were using it as a place to go for kayak trips and so on. And when BC Marine Trails went there on an excursion with the First Nations, discovered the school group with a huge bonfire and pit dug into the midden, and that kind of ended that project. The Tent Island, much used by people from Chemainus and Ladysmith and so on, a party place for kids in the spring, all of that, and it's just so close. You can row across there in 30 minutes, and a lot of beer bottles and waste left there. That's been closed for a long, long time. People still go there. Blackberry is a bit complicated. Layaxon, which is one of the smallest nations, has hardly any Indian reserve land of their own, has no treaty land, and the land at Blackberry is part of the lands that Mosaic, the timber management company, manages. And so between Mosaic listening to Layaxon and Mosaic not wanting to take on the liability of having people on their private land, Blackberry's not an option unless you can't find any other place to go, which happened to me a couple of years ago, so I ended up staying a night or two on Blackberry. Yep.
So they've taken the toilets down and all that there, I guess.
At Blackberry, the toilets, there was a toilet there. It has fallen into disrepair, and so if you do try to climb up on that structure, be prepared to end up in the bottom of it, because it's pretty rotten.
We stopped at Blackberry a number of years ago for, knowing that it was closed, we stopped for lunch, though.
Yeah.
There were signs everywhere, you can camp here but not here.
Oh, the last time I was there was no signs like that. There were signs that said the place was monitored by drones and other surveillance.
When was that? When was yours?
When was I? 2 Aprils ago.
Okay,
Yeah.
since I was there.
Yeah.
When I tried getting permission from the Layaxon, I started about 3 weeks before I was due to go on a trip, and I was told that the next tribal council meeting was a month from then, but before I could even send anything to the tribal council, I had to get in touch with Mosaic, because it was actually Mosaic who were controlling that land, and that when I tried to get in touch with Mosaic, they said I had to get in touch with the Layaxon tribal council first.
Yeah, Mosaic owns the land, and so it is their land to decide what they want to do with it, but they're in trying to be good partners with Layaxon, so it's easier to just say no. Yeah.
They effectively said no.
Yeah.
It was a
So-
classic catch-22.
Yeah, yeah.
So we paddled by and there were 8 tents on the
Yeah, so yeah, and then I went there to have lunch and found 8 people camping on there.
Yeah, so those people didn't ask. Anyway, it makes this whole between that provincial parks and Parks Canada makes it very difficult to navigate in the Southern Gulf Islands and have multiple choices without some distance to travel. Cabbage Island is difficult for all but the strongest paddlers to get to, get beyond if you're going around that end, and then find a place to camp. So that's recognized. I've had at least 2 meetings with Parks Canada in the last year and a bit on that. And Parks Canada is under direction, environmental conservation, good relations, and listening to First Nations direction for management of the land. And 3, let some people do recreation in the park. And it kind of goes in that order. Maybe the First Nations are actually first. So is there any activity around trying to get, in Pender, Beaumont. I knew it started with a B. Beaumont open again, or another site. There has been other sites looked at with a possible low dock so you can get off and then have some tent platforms towards the Narrows there, towards Browning. And that has been talked about, costed, no money available. Don't know when that'll ever happen.
The 2 meetings that you attended, was one of them the one that also a couple of members of
Yeah.
CISCA joined you in?
And BC Marine Trails, both had meetings, yeah, so, yeah. So you've read the report on that, yeah. So that's Cowichan.
So which island is next?
Because
the timing for Cabbage was awful.
Yeah, it was April and just, no pre-discussion, just happening, it's happening tomorrow. So this is one of the places, and this is where you can really see that line. This is the inland line. It goes from Jordan River all the way up to the west side of Strathcona Park. And all that land on the east side is that private land. And there's very little land that can be part of a settlement. And the Cowichan's approach to this area in pursuing their court case for title and so on was to bring British Columbia to the table. They've been trying to do that to reconcile and show that they had title and really create a sticky situation for the province, because the province didn't want to deal with them on some of their key issues. I was around for the beginning of the treaty process with these guys. It took a long time to get to step 1. And frankly, our government should, instead of saying, we're going to challenge this in court, we're going to protect private land, all of the things that have been said, they should have said, yes, we recognize that the nation has some title and rights, and we're going to continue to negotiate and attempt to reconcile. That would have quelled a lot of the hysteria that's going on right now. Stewardship fees, we've talked about a little bit. These are some of the places where you may encounter it. I would strongly suggest that you go to the website for BC Marine Trails and look at places where you want to go, click on those icons and see whether there's any mention of, and then follow any directions. Ohio at the bottom left has a treaty and have instituted some per person per night fees on their settlement land, which is their private land, titled land. Clayoquot Sound at a Howsett we've talked about. I think that fee is actually more than $15 now. The Taloquiet is asking for a donation. The Broughtons, there is some places where there's a $20 donation being requested. Mamalilikula, $20 as well. Yuquat on the southwest corner of Nootka Island is part of an emerging story for the southern and eastern sides of Nootka Island that will be, after a number of years of trying to talk to the Mawachat and Mulachat, is to develop a series of campsites on that eastern side, not on the surfy side, for visitation, and they're very keen on that. So that's good. And then we've already talked in detail about the Chatlet. So I've already talked about Indian reserves are private. Don't go there without permission. I would say those are probably places where title probably exists. If title probably exists there, a respectful thing is to not go on the beaches. Modern treaties are really the way, along with other agreements, to try and create a reconciliation. And the treaty lands also are private. And we have, I've already mentioned, I think that Pachidat's in negotiations, Didadat's in negotiations, Songhees, Comox, all of those are negotiations in progress. Try to be respectful of what's likely to emerge rather than go there and be busily taking advantage of the situation as it's developing. And so when we get information at BC Marine Trails from a nation about where, that gives direction from the First Nation about how they would like to see things managed, we try to reflect that in drop-downs for the, and guidelines from the nation. So places like Whaler Islet, great little place to camp. First Nations don't want you there anymore. That sort of thing. So that's what you can find on BC Marine Trails map. The House It Stewardship Fund, you can go to their website, select the site that you want to be at, dates I should say, and identify whether you're purchasing a daily access pass or season kind of thing, and how many people, and then print out or take a screenshot of the result if you've paid, and have that available when or if you encounter stewards or guardians in their territory. So the stewardship fee is for that corridor, and then there's another fee for going to the hot spring. One of the things that you might have done is to participate in site review or site condition reporting. And this is an important way of us reconciling with nations, as we can get information from paddlers that a site is being overused, or it needs maintenance, or there's some other, there's trees down or whatever. Those kinds of things, those site condition reports we're now beginning to share with the nations, so that it helps them monitor, and their guardian programs monitor what's going on in their territories. So that's a service that the paddling public can provide to the nation in exchange for the engagement and the reconciliation that we're seeking. Similarly, we also have, for nations that we're working with, provided them with a membership access to the BC Marine Trails map, so they know what information we've got on the map that is about their territory, and that way they can, see or understand, that we have done what we've said we're going to. There's a lot of resources that cover off a lot of what I've talked about today. The topic of tomorrow's webinar that I'm involved in is really citizen-based reconciliation. All of these are on BC Marine Trails website. Indigenous tourism directory for when you're paddling in different territories. You can find Indigenous businesses to frequent. Respecting Indigenous management directives, particular arrangements that we have with different First Nations over colloquiate, the Mamalalagula, etc. A more detailed piece that we did, BJ and I, on responsible paddling and discovery. And for those people who want to engage with a nation and don't have experience doing that, I wrote a guidance toolkit for the Outdoor Recreation Council about how to take first steps and proceed with engagement with nations anywhere in the province. So refer to the information on the map, read further resources that you might find about First Nations stuff, and pay the stewardship fees, submit site condition reports, learn from videos and your readings, become a BC a Marine Trails member if you're not, because that supports this work on your behalf. And a couple of books that I have been recommending to people goes first to the question about seated or unseated earlier. George Abbott was a MLA in the Gordon Campbell government, Liberal, and subsequently did a PhD at UVic in history, and his subsequent book sets out the story of Aboriginal title and the colonial history that's gone on since then. And he's optimistic, but it sets out that history. And then if you want to know about Indigenous law, Indigenous rights, Bruce McIver has written a book called Indigenous Rights in 1 Minute. Each key element of Aboriginal rights and title is described in a page to 2 pages, usually about a page and a half. Quick read, that's the first half of the book. The second half goes through every court case from St. Catherine's Milling through to the Chatlet court case, I think, and it again is described in a page or less, or less than 2. Those are 2 books. I carry them in my briefcase. I'm always excited to share those books with people. I've done a review of the Indigenous Rights book, which is on the BC Marine Trails site. I'm getting around to the other one, but they'll be available soon. And yeah, that's about it, I think. Any other questions? Oh, we have more questions.
For the stewardship fees, are there links on the map?
In some cases, yes. Otherwise, it directs you to go and look at the First Nations website. So we've experimented with trying to figure out a way of creating a portal so that you would always be able to go through the BC Marine Trails site and pay your fee, and then we would remit the money to the nation, that sort of thing. That hasn't worked out yet. Some nations don't want to do that, so that work hasn't been completed, if it ever will, I don't know. But yeah, just follow any direction you can, and if you're going in a place where it isn't one of the places I've described here, just look on the map or look on their website, and things will emerge, and it might not be on our website yet.
Thank you. There's a great deal of effort, work, and achievement that's happened in the past, and obviously a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done in the future. And my question is, first, I believe you said you had how many staff members at BCMT, full-time staff?
On this?
Yeah,
One.
Just on the Indigenous. Yes, that's what I thought I heard. And each nation typically would have how many full-time staff that can address these issues?
Well, usually if there's a decision that's required, that would happen from chief and council. So that could be anywhere from 3 people to 12 people, depending on the nation's constitution and their size and that sort of thing. And often there's a land management person, and so we would hope that they would deal with these issues. But the answer to how many people on the First Nations side, it really depends. Sometimes the chief is going to town to buy light bulbs for the houses down the street because that's also part of his job.
It's actually, it's very clear, obviously, this can't be their first priority. And
We are a small fleck on the back hair of the tail of the dog. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
A couple of rights questions then, I'm still struggling with. Could any of these Aboriginal folks build a nuclear power plant on their land? Because it's their right, it's their land. Can they then build a nuclear power plant?
I learned a long time ago when Pierre Trudeau was the Prime Minister that I don't live in speculation land, so I don't know the answer to that question.
The follow-up question is, are they automatically have the right to cut down old growth forests?
If it's their land and they have title to it, then they could conceivably be cutting down those trees. In the Nechatlan situation, in the year after their title was determined, they built a road across that land all the way out to those Indian reserves in the provincial park, and did remove a lot of large cedar trees and other trees. Whether they're old growth or not, I don't know. I wasn't on the ground. I did see pictures. They also built a road across an Indian reserve and ancient house sites by basically building a bridge across the Indian reserve so that they would not disturb the land. But yeah, lots of trees came down for that road. And the road was built to facilitate, as they said, the access to the land by their elders. I thought they could have used a boat, but that wasn't my choice. Hey,
Do you know anything about the status of Cordova Spit?
which spit?
Cordova Spit. Yeah, the South Valley in Santa.
Island View Beach.
Island View Beach.
The north end of Island View Beach is part of the Indian Reserve. You walk partway along that beach and then you come to a sign that says, from here on, you're on Indian Reserve. And so that would be private land. And I don't know how the survey was done there, but I would just respect that and not go beyond the sign.
But the northern part of that is private property, it's not part of the reserve.
The northern part
Yeah, I looked at it just recently.
okay. Yeah, so I don't have the map in my head. I can't tell the answer. Another question back there? No? Okay. All right, I've held you a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Norm, for sharing all of this information with us tonight. I'm going to maybe run through a little bit of it before we break. There is a lot of stuff here, and it's very complicated information. It's not easy to understand, and it's confusing. Try to learn what you can, because it's going to be to your benefit. The second part is acceptance. I've been paddling in this area long enough, and I know a lot of other people in this room have also. When we started paddling, we went where we wanted to, we camped where we wanted to, we paid nobody a fee, and nobody told us that we couldn't do it. Those days are over with. The acceptance part of this is to understand that we're facing a new reality, and we have to learn those rules and we have to live by them. The third part is to understand this is just the beginning. That not only the bands on the southern part of the island, but as a member of BC Marine Trails, they're in conversation with a whole pile of other bands about a whole number of projects, and many of them are going to be attaching fees to their area. And BC Marine Trails is even talking about it too. So this is just possibly the beginning of a new reality for all of us as paddlers. So that's our future. I know it's not the best news, but it is the news. The more we know about it, the better armed we are to deal with it and accept it and enjoy our paddling. So, Norm, the much sought after, seldom seen, Siska mug, good for hot and cold.
Perfect,
very
thank
much.
you.
Okay,
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll
Thank
take-
you
I'll take
again.
this one from my,
okay,
some of my previous engagements.
okay. If you come back, you'll get a match set, so thank you.
I will come back if you want.
Next month, before you go, don't rush off, next month before you go is our AGM, so it should be a good meeting. And we've got an interesting speaker, and you'll see about it in the newsletter coming up. Jane, do you want to talk about the event that's happening next Wednesday that this got bumped for, so people are aware of it?
I don't have a lot of you, it's sold out, so.
Okay, it's sold out, never mind. So if I don't see you on the water next meeting, paddle safe.